Hey guys, so I wanted to share a little bit of my story, my journey over the last few days. And last week I was having a really beautiful week and in a really good space and feeling very connected to myself and just generally feeling really blissful and peaceful. And I got to Thursday and I was in a meditation and I had this amazing realization that everything in my life had built up to that point in time so that I could have that realization. So it was, here in Cape Town, it was a very, very stormy day. And so I'd been invited to go and meet up with somebody so we could have a discussion around awakening and this kind of topic. And the storm was so hectic that I couldn't leave my house. And so I couldn't do what I had wanted or planned to do. And so I went and meditated because it was the perfect opportunity to do that. And it was in this meditation that I realized that if it hadn't been storming as much as it was, I would have been in my car and I would have driven off and I would have gone and had a great time, but I wouldn't have had this moment of realization. And everything else that I've experienced in my life, it all built up to this point where this beautiful realization showed me that everything had to be the way that it has been so that I could reach this point. And it just was this moment of awe and reverence and just feeling so beautifully connected to everything out in the world and not just myself. And it was a real opening moment and one of love and just such beauty and grace. And so I was in this space for a little while, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour or so. And then suddenly my ego just came crashing in on me and tried to attack. And because it felt threatened, it felt that it wasn't relevant, it wasn't needed, which it wasn't. And it tried to bring itself back in, and I found myself going into feelings of control, like my life has been controlled, which it hasn't. It's been guided, and everything has been happening for me, not happening to me. But my ego is trying to twist this beautiful moment around and this beautiful realization around into something that it wasn't, into fear and control and all of these other very hectic, horrible emotions that didn't make sense necessarily, but I was finding myself experiencing. So I immediately reached out to a friend, and luckily I managed to get hold of someone and say, this is just what's happened. I've had this beautiful experience, and then just all this fear and stuff just came tumbling in and crashing in on me. And luckily he managed to help me in that moment and help me to recognize that it was my ego, that it was just another game it was playing. And it was just there to do what it knows how to do. It only knows how to keep itself alive, and that's what it was doing. It was just trying to keep itself there and relevant and present. But it took away this beautiful moment of connection and realization. And so having this conversation where I could sit back and go, okay, I can see it is ego. I can see it's trying to get its hooks in and take over, and for a moment it did, and it's okay. From that moment, I could then bring myself back and calm myself down again, and just remind myself every time something came up that felt uncomfortable, or a thought or something that tried to make me feel anything other than peaceful and connected, I could see that it was then ego. So it was a really tough moment, and it really wiped me out. And I've heard Muji speaking about spiritual flu, that after he's had, in the beginning stages of his journey, when he'd had these moments of realization and expansion and whatever they were, he would go into feeling physically drained and exhausted and other physical symptoms, and he would refer to it as spiritual flu. And so after this moment had happened, my body crashed and I just became exhausted. I wasn't sick. I had a headache, but that was about it. But I was just physically drained, physically exhausted. And so I just needed to allow my body to rest, while I just kept reminding myself that the ego is just trying to play its games, and I don't have to go there. I don't have to identify with it, because as soon as I do, I'm going to go down that rabbit hole and find myself back in ego identification, and that's not the place I want to be. So for about a day and a half, I was allowing my body to rest, which is what it was calling for. It was just exhausted, so I just rested for Thursday afternoon and most of Friday. And then by Saturday morning, I started to come out of it, and I wasn't having to try and subdue these ego thoughts. The thoughts weren't coming as much anymore, and I wasn't having to try and keep my mind clear. It just became easier to then be in the moment again, and to be present, and to awaken, and to become more clear. And when that started happening on Saturday, I started finding myself being pulled in directions to do things that I wouldn't normally do. So things like, so I'm not normally a baker. I'm not great in the kitchen, but I just felt pulled to baking. So I baked some biscuits, and I made some pancakes, and made a few things, and it just felt good to be doing something without going into thought. So I was just enjoying being in the moment of baking and making what I was making, and not necessarily for the end result, although it was delicious. It was just about coming back to being present, to being in life as it is right now, and enjoying that moment. And the more I did that, and the more I connected with what I wanted to do in that moment, everything became more and more beautiful again. So I realized that this moment of ego taking over, or trying to get its hooks in, was actually a moment of expansion. So a lot of us on this path, we fear the ego. We fear those attacks from the ego. We feel like it's taking us off of path, and we feel like it's holding us back, or it's doing something it shouldn't be doing. But it is the journey. It is the process. Every time the ego tries to get its hooks in, it's showing you its cards. It's showing you its game. And it's up to you whether you identify with it and believe it, or whether you see it for what it is, which is an illusion. And so having the support that I did at the time when I really needed it was perfect. It was just it really helped me to come back to where I needed to be, which is present, and to not buy into those thoughts and not buy into that way of being. So support is really, really crucial in this journey, but it is a unique journey for everybody. There are similarities along the way and certain milestones and things that we reach which in comparison are very similar to other people's experiences, but it's a solo journey. We need to do this on our own because it is our own journey, but that support is very important. And so to reach this point of seeing that those moments of identifying with the ego again are the beautiful moments, because as soon as we see it, we evolve, we expand beyond that game, beyond that moment of being pulled towards ego. And since then, since that moment of ego identification that I had, things have become much more clear and simple and beautiful again. And I'm connecting now more from my heart space in the awakening journey, and seeing more of the connections around me with everything, and the connections with the people in my life are happier and simpler and more beautiful and more rich, and our moments together are more meaningful, and we have more fun because there's no agenda and there's no trying to push it in any certain direction. Just by allowing it to be what it is, to allowing this moment to be what it is, we can really enjoy the people around us so much more than when we are in our heads and in our thoughts and being pulled into ego identification. It's a really beautiful thing when we are in the moment with the people in our lives. And so I just wanted to share a little bit of that struggle that I had, and to say that this isn't always the easiest path. It's not, but it's worthwhile. Every time the ego attacks, it's a moment for you to expand beyond that and to go deeper and to go further along in your own progress. And it is the path. So don't be scared if you feel like your ego is attacking too much. See it, witness it, acknowledge it. But you don't have to do anything about it. Just come back to presence. Come back to being present. And from there, we just expand and evolve even more. And come back to being in reality even more. And it's such a beautiful thing. And so don't fear the ego. Don't fear those moments of being attached to the ego. If you get pulled into ego identification, we are so hard on ourselves, and we judge ourselves for identifying with the ego again. But it's okay. That is the process. That is the journey. Is to see it, is to experience it, and observe it, and keep bringing yourself back. Keep bringing yourself back to presence, back to living from your true self, living from consciousness. And from there, those moments of fullness, of clarity, they become more and more beautiful and connected and loving. And it's a really amazing thing to see and to watch people going through their journey and their process as well. And so don't give up. If you are identified with ego again, it's okay. It's okay. Just be there. Just see it. Because once you see it playing its games, it can't get its hooks in. It will slowly fade away, because living from the true self, it becomes unnecessary. It becomes irrelevant. And that's when we can really enjoy the unfolding of life and of everything happening around us, without trying to control, without trying to swing things in the direction that we want them to go, that our ego wants them to go. So instead of fighting and resisting this moment and what is, or fighting those attacks or trying to resist those ego attacks, it just sucks you more and more back into it. So just witness it, just allow it, observe it, and just see it. And from there you can come back to the awake space. And so that's what I have for you today. And I hope you take something from my journey and from witnessing my struggles and being a part of this process. And if you would like to know more or discuss it, please reach out. I'm always available to chat about this. So other than that, have a really beautiful day, and I will chat to you again soon.